All right, awesome. We are set. All right, well, welcome, folks. Thanks for joining us this afternoon for our info session on the Teaching and Innovation Incubator's open call for 2026 projects. This is going to be primarily an info session, so we're going to run through a lot of information about both the incubator and the open call. At the time, there will be time for questions, of course. Feel free to use the chat as well. The session is being recorded for others to view afterwards, too. And I'll just note really quickly as well, I believe in the daily bulletin, it was said this was a 30-minute session. We had booked a 45-minute block, so we'll still try to wrap up in the 30. If you want to stick around longer, we will be here as well. Otherwise, just want to try to respect your time too. So really quickly, I'm Kyle Schultz. I'm the Managing Director of the Incubator, joined by my colleague Sarah Seabrook, our Special Projects, Communications, and Community Engagement Specialist. And we'll just, again, walk through a bit of both the incubator's purpose as well then as the parameters for the open call. So I will get us started then. And I just want to start with kind of the scope of the Teaching Innovation Incubator so that we're all on the same page. Because again, it is a relatively new unit on campus still. It was largely created back in 22 in what we called a beta phase. And we use the word beta because we were still at that point in time trying to figure out really what the purpose of the incubator ought to be. What should its mandate be? How should it support our colleagues on campus? And we wanted to just get a better idea of what it might be before it then allows this kind of open call for new projects as well. Our primary goal, though, of the Teaching Innovation Incubator is to support experimentation with bold teaching and learning ideas. We often, when we talk about how the incubator supports projects or what kinds of projects that come to the incubator look like, we often think about these are the kind of projects that realistically no one should try to do on their own. It would be far too big. More than that, no group of folks from the same department alone realistically should be focusing on an incubator project. We want to see projects that span the university, projects that are as big and complex and potentially transformative as they are, that require bringing folks from across the university together to work in these kind of interdisciplinary groups of colleagues to tackle big teaching and learning related problems. So we want the kind of problems or the kind of projects that when you think about how you might accomplish them, you're immediately met with like barriers, either systemic barriers about the institution, maybe it's capacity barriers, financial barriers, really anything that would otherwise make it more or less impossible for you to do on your own. That's where the incubator comes in and provides both the funding, but also some of that hands-on project support to make your idea happen. So that's what we do. We started with around 6 what we call beta projects. These were projects that were just given to the incubator to test out, again, its processes and see what works. And then as of this past January 2025 is when we had our first set of new incubator projects join. And these, again, were part of the first open call that was announced last fall and allowed 3 projects chosen by an advisory committee then to come into the incubator. I just want to talk briefly about like kind of what some of the scope of an incubator project is to help also understand what we mean by these bold potential problems or projects that are being focused on in the incubator space. One of the projects that is going to be graduating probably first in end of November or so, for example, is a project on sustainability in the curriculum. So this was a project that saw that sustainability as a topic is really something that all undergraduate students ought to confront in some way, shape, or form in their undergraduate programs, regardless of which program that student finds themselves in. Some disciplines, some programs, some faculties, this is an easier sell than others. Some is already embedded, but there are many programs across campus that don't immediately see a connection to sustainability, even though students believe it's important, society believes it's important, the university believes it's important. So the project was all about how do we integrate sustainability education into the entire curriculum for undergraduate students. So again, a project like this then brought together faculty and staff and students from across the university, engaged in working group sessions to develop both a framework and a toolkit such that any program could choose their own definition of sustainability. and then apply the framework and toolkit to help them figure out how they integrate that into their own curriculum. Some of the offshoots of that project have been things like a grant program that is now established in the Sustainability Office to give faculty some financial capabilities to pursue the work necessary to investigate this. It also developed a certificate for students for programs that still did not see an opportunity to connect sustainability into their program, but now those students still have an opportunity to invest additional time in sustainability and make it part of their own program. So that's like one style of incubator project. Again, campus-wide, bringing in lots of different people, has implications for the campus as well. Some of the newer projects that came in through the open call, as you may not be surprised to hear, very Gen AI focused. But an example, one of these, there's one in the School of Pharmacy that is looking at creating opportunities for pharmacy students to practice culturally safe healthcare with Indigenous patients. And here's a situation where rather than trying to bring Indigenous community members into a clinical setting for those pharmacy students to interact with one after another, instead they're using Gen AI to recreate these kinds of complex interactive scenarios such that a student then can practice having those culturally safe conversations with an Indigenous individual, but safely in an environment where they're not taken advantage of, they're not being tokenized, but they still are being informed by their experiences, as well as the experiences of our pharmacy colleagues and some of our Indigenous colleagues on campus as well. And that's another example of an incubator project in the sense that it's starting from a context that resonates with the people behind the project. But something like this, one can imagine it being useful for other patient-related scenarios or disciplines, such as potentially optometry or social work, for example. So again, it comes from a different starting perspective, but it still has that wide potential applicability. And that's what we want to see in incubator projects is projects that do span at least segments of the university beyond a single contextual element. Again, so as I said, these projects are all cross-functional. And by cross-functional, I mean using both faculty and staff working together, and cross-faculty because they do often involve faculty members from multiple departments, faculties as well. I do want to state early on too that the focus of incubator projects is largely evaluation focused rather than research focused. That's simply because we want to within the incubator see how it does impact what we do across the University of Waterloo. Research might play a role, and research might be important to you and your project that you have in mind, but it's not a condition for acceptance into the incubator. We are much more focused on ensuring that it has that applicability. It impacts students, undergraduate students learning across campus. If that is going to be proven with research, so be it. But otherwise, we will help prove that with just good evaluation. And then one final piece about kind of the contextual element of the entire incubator is there's also a relatively new part of the incubator on campus that is known as an EdTech sandbox. This is a physical space on campus where we have numerous technological affordances, such as a set of VR headsets, a 3D scanner, a 360-degree camera, as well as a classroom setup that is similar to an active learning classroom with pods and smart TVs that can be accessed that kind of replicates the classroom setting. And that EdTech sandbox could also be a place where your idea could have a home to exist within and use those affordances to help your idea come to fruition. So these are all parts of what we have available to you for your kinds of projects. I'll note one final thing before I move on. You might have seen in the Daily Bulletin recently this news about the Teaching Innovation Incubator merging with the Center for Teaching Excellence and the Center for Extended Learning. So there is, we'll just say up front, some uncertainty about what this new unit will look like going forwards, but we do have commitment and approval that this incubator open call is going forward. So simply, if you want to apply, have full acknowledgement and faith that this will go forward. Your project, if successful, will be funded, will be supported. Nothing will change in terms of how you interact with our supports. The only thing that might change is, naming conventions, for example, but otherwise, this as an opportunity does exist. So that's a lot about the incubator itself. I want to talk then about the open call focus. Last year for our first open call, we had a thematic round we were trying to, at that point in time, address what was resonating with a lot of our campus, global futures. Certainly since then, we've seen the Global Futures Fund launch after the incubator's first open call. So global futures, clearly, that fund can focus on global futures. We are now shifting away from an annual thematic version of the open call to something that is more of an actual consistent open call focus. And that focus is primarily on two things. One, we are encouraging proposals that look at what we are calling efficient and effective strategies for innovative teaching and learning, as well as I just mentioned before, technologies or innovations that exist within the EdTech sandbox. The second one makes sense. If you have an idea that resonates with some of the tech in the sandbox already, that's a great opportunity to use existing functionality on campus to help your idea succeed. The first piece is in many ways a reaction to the times that we're in. And as we are being asked to do things more efficiently, we are also trying to encourage innovative thinkers to think about how that might impact your ideas and how might you be able to create innovations that are efficient and effective at the same time. So we're not saying that your project absolutely has to meet one of these two. We do strongly encourage, however, that you find a lens through which to take your project idea and apply it to one of these for the sake of your project having potential success. These are what we have heard matters. These are what we want to try to address. This is what we might be able to use our investment of resources to make an impact at UW that is meaningful right now. Now, as you think about what that project itself might result in, these are just some examples of what it could be. So for example, it could result in a proposal that looks at a new academic program, something that's done perhaps more efficiently and effectively, new approaches to teaching and assessment practices. Certainly in the Gen AI era, it might be something that resonates with you as well to investigate, innovative uses of educational technologies, and then societal advances to improve our learning environment. These are all elements that could also be part of your proposal as you think through how you might contextualize your idea. Sarah, pass it over to you to talk about eligibility and funding.
Thanks, Kyle. So now that we have an understanding of the history of the incubator, who we are, what we're trying to do here at Waterloo, let's turn our attention to some of, I guess, like the meat and potatoes of what we're looking at in the applications and who's eligible. And so starting off with applicant eligibility, primarily we're looking for project leads that are full-time permanent employees at the University of Waterloo. So this includes tenure and non-tenured stream faculty, any instructors, teaching staff, academic support staff are all welcome to apply as project leads or as co-leads. Additional applicants are allowed on the project, including undergraduate, graduate students, sessional instructors, and even external organizations and partnerships. However, they cannot be the primary applicant for a teaching innovation incubator projects. And it's important for us to note that for faculty and instructors interested in applying and undertaking one of these incubator project grants, they count towards educational leadership under the new policy 7677. And it's important to also emphasize that these projects cannot be existing or future master's level research projects or doctoral dissertations. We're truly looking, as Kyle said, more at like that evaluation piece, that impact piece, things that are going to kind of decenter traditional teaching practices and transform teaching and learning at Waterloo. Have I forgotten anything? I guess it would be helpful to talk about project funding. So what are you applying for when you apply for an incubator project? Essentially, when you are applying, you're applying for access to funds and access to human capital in the incubator. And so projects accepted into the incubator can get upwards to $20,000 for project-specific resources. Things like student remuneration, honoraria for guests that have a specific expertise, subject matter expertise, if you will. There's budget for conference travel and accommodations, but of course we are in a time of fiscal restraint, so we'll keep that to a minimum. Educational, software, hardware, and any knowledge mobilization activities. So ineligible expenses look like salaries for applicants and co-applicants, the hiring of research coordinators or research assistants, as that's kind of part of what the incubator value proposition is, if you will. We provide a team of research coordinators that are available to you for supporting your project. You can't use any of the funds to cover a teaching release, and you cannot use the funds to procure any technologies or softwares that are currently offered at UW or procured through the EdTech Sandbox. I'm going to put the link to the eligible expenses that are on our website in the chat right now, so you can read up on them. And then we'll turn our attention now to some of the support the Teaching Innovation offers. What does that look like? Kind of what are you getting yourself into in joining the incubator? And so I would say there are many different buckets that Teaching Innovation Inky support covers, primarily being the ones listed on the screen. As Kyle mentioned before, we do a lot of brokering of connections for project ideation, projects more broadly, and networking. And so we're really trying to get you in front of the people that you need to talk to in order for your idea, your project to succeed at the University of Waterloo and beyond. So we provide project ideation support, project management, a lot of project management support from the day that you enter the incubator. We sit down and kind of map out your project goals, and then we are along the way making sure that you're hitting those milestones and that you have access to the expertise for evaluation support, ideation, and access to the educational spaces that we're supporting on campus, and of course, communications and event management. So again, all of that's listed on our website, so please check it out, and we'll be happy to take questions about what our support looks like and what constitutes eligibility in the Q&A, and I'll just pass things back over to Kyle now to talk about adjudication and deadlines, all the fun stuff.
Thanks, Sarah. The selection criteria that you see on the screen here are what you will be evaluated on. These also form the foundation of the application itself, so we try to make it very discreet. You know what we want you to talk about, that is what you're evaluated on. I'll go through each of these briefly so you get a sense for what we mean by each. First one, innovation within context. We recognize that what is innovation in one discipline may not be innovative in another, and vice versa. So we don't care as much that your idea is unheard of and never been done before. If what you propose is innovative within your home department or your home faculty, even if it's been done regularly in a different faculty, that still is innovation within context. So we just want to make sure that what you're proposing is indeed unique to the teaching environment that you work within. We want you to talk about how your idea is scalable and has impact. And in the best case scenario, both. But we also recognize both is potentially an ideal situation. So we do ask you to either tell us how your idea is scalable. So that would refer to, your idea maybe starts in one context, but has the potential to reach hundreds, if not thousands of students on campus. Highly scalable. Maybe the impact isn't as strong, but vice versa then. Maybe your idea will have a huge impact on a small group of students, but not be as scalable. Both those are fine. We ask you to speak about at least one of the two. And again, in some cases, maybe both are applicable to your idea, but we do want to see you at least speak to one. We want to hear about how your idea is feasible. And feasibility really does mean as well, are you aware of the barriers that are already existing in place that might impact how feasible your idea is long-term? Doesn't mean it will stop your idea from being successful, but it lets us know that you are aware of those as barriers that we need to address as part of your time in the incubator. And otherwise, what will ensure that your idea has success long-term that we can work towards? We do ask about your team composition. That goes back to what we said earlier, that we want to see teams that are built cross-functionally and with cross-faculty. So that ties into the next point as well. We just want you to express in your application how your project idea is bringing across people from across campus together to make these things happen. We want to see how your project is aligned to an institutional priority. Again, this could still be something related to global futures, for example, could also be related to some of the other priorities that we have on campus, such as indigenization, EDIR, accessibility, sustainability. These are all priorities that we are invested in right now. So can you draw the line between your project idea and something that the institution has overtly said is a priority of ours? And then we do also want to see evidence of existing research. We recognize, of course, that some ideas are truly like newly innovative and maybe there's not a lot of existing research out there about your idea. Nevertheless, there are likely elements that speak to the domain that you're working within that you can still refer to show that you are aware of what exists out there already. So again, these are what you'll be asked to speak about. These are what the advisory committee that will adjudicate your proposals is looking at as well. As we start to wrap up, project expectations, I think the one thing I want to clarify as well is that an incubator project does differ from, let's say, a typical grant you might receive, largely with that first point on the left there. When you work with us in the incubator, it comes with an expectation that we are working on these things together. So of course, it is your idea, it is your project. We are here to support you. You are the project leads, but then we do work with you along the way because as Sarah explained, not only do you receive the funding for your project, but then you also receive that hands-on support by Sarah and I as members of the incubator, but also some of we have teams of co-op students who are upper year co-op students with experience doing research and project coordination support so that they can be inserted into your project and provide that kind of regular day-to-day support to make sure that you are staying on top of things. We fundamentally understand faculty members, staff members are busy people on campus, so we want to support you so that you can bring that great idea and we'll help get it across the finish line. So that's kind of the interaction piece. Like we work closely together along the entire step of your process in your project so you don't feel like you're left to your own. The other elements I think are more standard for any given funded opportunity. Things like we expect you to share project updates that we might then feed into, again, as Sarah described too, some of that kind of communication work that we do. We might want to hear the updates from you, but then we help spread them far and wide. We do ask our projects to participate in different events to share the good work that they're doing because, again, it's exciting work that ought to be shared with our university community. And again, we expect a report of sorts either at the end of the first year or depending on the length of your project in the incubator, and maybe there will be only a final report. For example, I should have probably said this earlier, but incubator projects within the incubator, again, the length kind of varies, right? You might apply for a 1-year project or a 2-year project, or the project might just take longer and spend more time in the incubator. That's all absolutely fine. We don't have a hard deadline necessarily where we kick you out. What remains static is that $20,000 of funding. That does not increase or you don't get an initial $20,000 each year in the incubator. It's one lump sum of $20,000 for the length of your project. What does remain with your project, however, is that support from our team, regardless of how long you spend in the incubator. Sarah, I'll pass back over to you to talk about this.
Thank you. So while we encourage you to consult with us before finalizing your incubator project application, it is not required, but strongly recommended. And so we kind of take an informal approach to booking project consultations. You can reach out to the email on the slide. It's the general incubator email, which Kyle and I have access to request a consult, and we will collect personal details for project lead and co-lead. And we'll set up a meeting to kind of hear about your idea and provide some feedback to help make sure that you're focused on the criteria, and B, I guess some of the other considerations that Kyle fleshed out earlier. From there, what happens is the projects following consultation, you'll take that feedback back with you to revise your application. Proposals are due to us by December 1st. So please ensure that that deadline is in your calendar. And then from there, what happens is we take all of the project applications and we send them to an adjudication committee of, it's a cross-disciplinary adjudication committee of academic leaders and key academic support staff, who will meet in early January to basically discuss all of the proposals, and they will then reach a decision. It's also important for me to note that the adjudication representation is on our website and does include undergraduate student representation. One of the things that Kyle spoke to, but that I really want to emphasize in this info session, is that at the Incubator, we really focus on putting students at the center of the work as well, informing these projects. And so one of the things that I think is worth underlying is really that because of the undergraduate student research coordinators sitting at, I guess, like the center of the organization in the Incubator, they're always tapping in, providing ideation support, able to kind of provide, I guess, critical perspectives on the utility or applicability in their learning context. And so the same is true for the adjudication. We do have undergraduate student representative on there too. And then, yeah, decisions will come out shortly thereafter in early January. We will reach out to you directly, and then there will be an announcement followed that in the daily bulletin. Kyle, did I forget anything?
No, I think that's good. So maybe we can just turn to Q&A. Again, I said earlier, we are here until 1:45. If you have to go at 1:30, that's fine. But otherwise, we're happy to take any questions you have. Either feel free to raise them aloud or type them in the chat as well. We're happy to answer any questions you have. Senior comment, Anwar, yes. So can you please provide examples of support you provide beyond the funding? Yeah, so the largest thing that we provide, I suppose, is, so again, each project team gets access to kind of a support team behind the scenes. The support team is comprised of, well, Sarah and myself, but then we have a cohort of upper year undergraduate co-op students who provide what we call kind of both research, evaluation support, and project coordination support. So what that looks like is that they're going to be there to do whatever that might mean for your project. So maybe it's lit reviews, environmental scans, maybe it's data collection, data analysis, maybe it's running focus groups or interviews, whatever that kind of evaluation research part of your project might look like, we're there to support you. And then we also provide that project coordination support. So we'll be the ones who set agendas, book meetings, take notes, share things with you, create those connections. Again, if you need, there's always a certain point of time where you need your idea to get out there. So we'll do the communications, we'll create events. Like, we really try to take all that logistical part of a project off of your shoulders. You come with the idea, you come with the kind of the insight, the expertise that you bring. We try to fill in all the other gaps so that you can just succeed. That's kind of the plan of what we envision. If I didn't explain anything correctly, Anwar, please feel free to type in the chat otherwise, but I'm going to go to Tom next.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Kyle and Sarah, for this. I did have a couple of questions. We have my wife and I, Robin, who's actually right now works at the Center for Will, but is moving on to become an educational developer. We have a piece of ed tech, a platform that has actually been accepted into the Accelerator Center. So I'm trying to, I guess my question is, first of all, would being in another incubator preclude being in the TII? And second, do you feel that it's worthwhile doing both, or should we just stick to one?
It's a good question, Tom. Maybe a tough question to answer right now. This might be something we follow up with afterwards and just chat through the idea more. I will say you wouldn't be unique in that approach. We have seen projects that have been funded where they kind of almost take their project into different buckets of sorts, and they see one bucket that is really related to what we try to advance, which is like the teaching and learning side, and again, creating connections across campus with folks you otherwise might not connect with, and try to support the pedagogical side. And at least for this other project I'm thinking of, the other part was more of almost like an ASU perspective that was a bit different from what's happening in the classroom itself. So in that case, it was already being supported elsewhere. It was being funded elsewhere, but there was still value recognized in partnering with us And again, the advisory committee thought the same as well, to advance this part because of its potential reach for students. So I don't think that should preclude you from thinking about applying for this as well. Some of the nuance about like the tech itself already existing, that I'd want to talk through more to see what that might look like. But again, I think like our main ineligibility factor there is simply that we don't want, you know, for example, in the sandbox right now, we have a set of 20 VR headsets. We wouldn't want to start funding people to purchase more VR headsets. We already have access to that in the sandbox, so we'd rather the funds go towards net new things. So we'd have to think about like, what does it look like? In some cases, we see the funding needing to go to like licensing of software because licenses are what they are, and maybe that's another element that might align with what you're thinking. I don't know, but like I think what you said, nothing about that is necessarily like a okay red flag. You can't do that. It's more what is the nuance of what you're proposing, and can we talk about it more? I think.
Okay. The other piece of it is you had talked about the fact that, or the other question I had was you talked about the fact that for existing master's PhD work is sort of considered ineligible for this. This isn't current master's PhD work, but Robin is going to use it as the basis for her PhD at Brock. So I guess my question is, what is that? Is that an issue?
It might not be because, as you said, Robin is also an education developer, will be as well, right? So I think it's different. We're trying to avoid situations where the incubator acts as a funnel of funds for a current student who otherwise would not receive funds, or kind of bypasses typical funding structures. Especially with Robin being a student at Brock instead of Waterloo, my initial reaction is probably not an issue. I think it's avoiding that doesn't capture the issue that we have experienced in the past. And I think it's so I don't think that's an issue as much. But again, would love to chat more, Tom, if you're up for that.
Yep. I think we definitely will. So thanks for this. Really appreciate it, guys.
Thanks, Tom. Anwar, I saw your hand go up before. I just want to make sure I'm not losing sight of a follow-up question.
Yeah, all good. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, folks, about what we talked about today? I will say, as you're maybe thinking, again, that TII at urlu.ca is probably the easiest way to contact Sarah and I as you think about ideas. We love chatting about this stuff, so we're never bothered by you wanting to reach out to us and chat about an idea, right? I think this is still relatively new, that there is a lot of nuance here that might be different from typical grant programs, for example. Also potentially different from if you had applied for the Global Futures Fund. There are similarities there, but also differences as well. So again, hopefully this helps in terms of, okay, I understand better. If this is still appealing to you and you want to chat more, let's connect and we can make sure that your idea has a chance to be spoken through. But I think I've now seen either in the chat or virtually everyone has a chance to say something. So maybe I will slowly wrap things up so you don't have to feel guilty about leaving. But thank you all very much for attending. Again, this has been recorded. This will be shared afterwards if you need to recap anything. And otherwise, Sarah and I look very much forward to chatting with all of you if you so choose, and look forward to seeing your applications come through as well. All right. Thank you very much, and have a great rest of your day.
Take care. Thank you. Goodbye.